but if you're not gonna get out, do not make Angela mad. Tries to save her.
Him.
Or him, yeah, sorry. Wrote pronouns wrong in my notes.
That's okay. They're everywhere.
They leave so that Neil can deliver that incorrect information to Angela, who is like, help me stop them. And then Neil tries to leave. He should have just gone with the Winchesters. And Angela catches him and kills him, as predicted.
Shocking.
Sam and Dean are at the graveyard, and Dean is not confident in his plan at all, but it was the only one that he could come up with. Angela shows up and tries to beg Sam for mercy. Like, I didn't want to be brought back. And I'm still me. And he shoots her in the head. He's like, no. And then he runs for his life, and Dean shoots her just in time to save Sam, and she falls into the grave, and they like stab her with like a sword. And Dean goes, again, what's dead should stay dead. Sam and Dean rebury the casket, and Sam's like, hey, that was a pretty good plan, and mentions that his hand is broken. Jared actually broke his hand while they were filming 203 Bloodlust, but didn't realize it was broken, and then they started filming this episode, and then like halfway through this episode, he's like, oh no, I actually need an x-ray on this. It is not getting better. And they're like, ooh, buddy, that is broken.
Yikes.
But they were already started filming, so putting a cast on would be a continuity issue, especially because like they filmed the scenes out of order. So they had to wait until the episode was completely done before they put the cast on.
And didn't we talk about this in a previous episode where I was like, how many times has this man broken a body part?
Probably has come up before. I think this was like the first actual time though that it was like a broken like bone. It gets really inconvenient when they start meeting like supernatural beings that can like heal people, because then it's like there's not a lot of reason for injuries to carry over for a long period of time.
You could just explain it by like, yeah, Cass was feeling spiteful this week.
But back here in season 2, they're like, okay, the next episode we'll say that you broke your hand, and then, you know, for a few episodes now he can like wear a cast. I think all the way till the end of the season he has a cast on.
Yeah, for like quite a while.
Dean also takes a dig at Sam here, saying that Sam was the one who was bait because Angela had such crappy taste in men. What a brother thing to say, but not untrue about Angela.
Oh man, yeah, alive or dead.
Yeah, it's so her dad is such a good example. He was such a good guy as far as we could tell, and she did not take that to heart.
I'm sure if she had lived, she would have made some better decisions after getting character development.
Dean then looks at Mary's grave, and I think this is when we get like the first like full shot of the grave. Like when Sam was there, like it was really zoomed in, but we get a full shot of what it says. It just literally says Mary Winchester, 1954-1983, in loving memory. No date or time or anything. The boys hit the road, and I was like, we're getting a lot of them driving. Like there has to be another scene here, because it was just like them driving and then them driving more from a different angle and then an inside of the car shot, and then finally Dean pulls over and gets out, and he's like clearly like trying not to get emotional. So Sam also gets out, and Dean is apologizing. He apologizes for how they're acting and for their dad's death, and he actually says out loud for them for the first time what they've both kind of been thinking is that John's death is linked to his miraculous recovery. And he's like, John was your dad too, and yeah, he like died to save me, but like that deprived you of having a dad, and I'm sorry. I say good riddance on Sam's behalf, but they do love their dad, so they are upset about him not being there.
Unfortunately.
We have to be sensitive, they're grieving.
Yeah, I say Sam is better off with you than he was with John, but
Yeah.
Dean says that coming back wasn't natural. He was dead, and therefore he should have stayed dead, like he's been touting all episode. Sam sits with that for like a minute, and then Dean's like, what are you gonna say to make that better? I don't think anything. And Sam doesn't say anything, and I'm like, Sam, I have so many things I would want to say here. I do wish that they'd written him something, but I get why they didn't.
Yeah, and I feel like something I noticed with that is like, I'm bad at comforting people, so I don't know what I would have said. But
Same.
I think, yeah. But before we see Sam again in like the pilot, right, he left when he was like 18-ish, and definitely at that time, you know, he was still under John's thumb. Dean obviously really helped raising him, and I just wonder, like, was Sam ever in a position where Dean would be telling him emotional stuff like this, and he would have had to comfort him? Like, this could be one of the first times that he really opens up about something like that, and he has no basis to go off to offer comfort.
Yeah, I do think that is definitely something that's happening here. Sam's been trying pretty much since this season started to comfort Dean, but it does seem like he just doesn't know. And I really think it is because Dean hid a lot of stuff from Sam, like traumatic things happened to him. They never talked about Mary growing up. Talking about Mary was a very rare occurrence and was usually met by either John or Dean with absolute just like anger to shut the conversation down. So I wrote in my notes it would not kill them to hug each other every once in a while.
Yeah, come on, you're not British, you should hug.
You don't need to, maybe you don't know what to say, but you could at least put your arms around each other. I feel like that would make everybody feel a little bit better.
Yeah.
Please.
Myself included. But Sam doesn't say anything and the episode just kind of ends. On to some of the weekly segments and panels, starting with death count. This week, I think we saw 3 deaths. It was Angela, Matt, the boyfriend, and Neil.
The creep.
Yeah. Is that all of them? Yeah, Lindsay survived. So that brings our on-screen total to 156, and then there wasn't any other deaths. We saw all of our deaths, so that brings the on and off-screen total for the show to 939 plus. We also tried to assign an MVP of the week, so let's see who everybody would like to nominate for that. Let's start with Meredith.
I'm gonna go with Dean, because he was kind of driving this whole case and was very focused on him.
Yeah, he was on Team Case this week, and he came up with the plan.
But also, I was so tempted to say Angela just to be funny, because I really enjoyed watching her be evil.
I feel bad for Angela.
Yeah.
She didn't ask to be brought back. She got cheated on and she died in a pretty tragic accident. It's not really fair that she came back and happened to be evil when she came back.
Yeah.
That was really on Neil.
Come on, Neil. You're not the MVP.
No.
And Jen.
I'm gonna go with Dean as well. I like that Sam even points out that Dean's plan to lure Angela to the graveyard was pretty sharp, so he had some good ploys.
Yeah.
And, as we could tell by the end of the episode, he was not on his A game. He was not feeling his best, but he still managed to really pull through on this case.
Yeah, that's true. And Francis.
I am going with Dean as well because, like Meredith said, he was the one that, started the case and spearheaded it. He was the one that, saw the unholy ground. And also he was the one that staked Angela, killing the zombie, which my subtitles actually said body tissue crunching.
Ew.
As he was staking her. And I was like, is this for real? I had to rewind it. But yeah, so Dean is my MVP.
It's real unnecessary.
Ooh.
Yeah, I was debating a little bit Sam or Dean, but you guys have convinced me Dean. I don't think Dean's had a full sweep across the board MVP. It's his time. This was his episode.
Go Dean.
I'm willing to give that to him. Next, this show has so few women, so let's put it to the Bechdel test. Did we have 2 named women in this episode?
Yeah.
Yes.
We did. We had Angela. We had Lindsay. Did they talk to one another? Boy, did they ever.
No.
Yeah. They had a
they did.
full-blown confrontation. I think that was about a man, though, so...
Yeah.
I think this one still fails. I don't know how you guys feel.
It's fun to watch, though.
It was fun to watch,
I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm just really into murder this week.
but I'm gonna count that as a fail.
Yeah.
So close.
Almost there.
Their fight was very much about Lindsay sleeping with Angela's boyfriend and then Angela dying as a direct result.
I'd be mad, yeah.
This week's case of the week was a zombie. As Sam pointed out in the episode, comes from a lot of different cultures. I don't know if anyone had any zombie stuff they want to talk about.
I have one very short paragraph.
Awesome. Start there.
Yeah. Next time we have zombies, I'm really going to do more research on the history because it's really fascinating and there's a whole bunch of stuff in Haiti that we should get into, but I didn't do that this week because of reasons. The zombie here specifically had some ancient Greek stuff with it, so I wanted to see if the ancient Greeks practiced necromancy. There is some research. A lot of it was behind paywalls.
Ugh, paywalls.
And I didn't have very much time. But one author pointed out that there are some Greek myths with necromancy rituals, most notably in the Odyssey. Odysseus's descension into the underworld involved a necromancy ritual, which was possibly inspired by heroic tomb cults. Sadly, I did not get the chance to find out what the hell those are, but they sound really cool. And lots of ancient depictions of necromancy were inspired by this part of the Odyssey. And the rest of the tropes in this episode are pretty standard issue zombie tropes that I will get into at a later date because zombies are interesting. I don't like watching them, but they're fun to read about.
Fair enough. Did anyone else have anything they wanted to add about zombies?
I did more research into necromancy than zombies.
Okay, cool.
I feel like it was more centered around the necromancy of it because of how Angela was brought to life.
Yeah.
But like Meredith said, necromancy, actually the earliest writings of it came from ancient Greek and Greek mythology. So the Odyssey was actually the very first mentioning of necromancy is what I could find of everything that it was saying. Grieving, which is one of my favorite books. I love the Odyssey, so my research was fun. Also, necromancy has a lot of works in fiction, so like it's mentioned in fiction a lot in like the Percy Jackson series, because that also pertains to Greek mythology.
Oh, love those.
Oh my god, I love them. And then we have stories like Frankenstein, which is one of like the original necromancy stories, The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, more recently The House with a Clock in its Walls, Pet Sematary, American Horror Story, Hocus Pocus. Tons and tons of novels have had necromancy in them. Basically anything with like witches, wizards, and witchcraft, you're typically going to see a lot of necromancy, or at least something pertaining to it. So I thought that was really interesting. And then also there was a little snippet where vampires were also seen as necromancers in certain people's eyes, or like the product of necromancy, because they are the undead. They're not technically zombies, but they're also in that undead category.
They're sexy zombies.
Right?
Unless you're watching Warm Bodies.
Yeah.
I did really breeze over Dean making a Pet Sematary reference in this episode. That like reference was very like accurate and apt. Also, I'm watching Buffy right now, and I just watched an episode where that was like the reference, where like a cat came back from the dead and then a bunch of people. It was a whole thing.
Necromancy isn't something to play with. Like you gotta know what you're doing if you're gonna do it. And especially now in today's era, they're not really showing necromancy anymore as like resurrecting people. It's more of like talking to dead people, like via like Ouija boards and stuff like that.
Yeah, necromancy's a really fun trope to play with. I have it a lot in my stories.
Yeah, it's really interesting, especially with all the research behind it.
I was looking at TV tropes for it, so very serious research, but kind of related to the necromancy is the TV trope came back wrong, which we do see in different pieces of horror media usually, such as Pet Sematary. So I always think that stuff is really interesting to play around with. The idea that something comes back, but whatever made it, that person just isn't there anymore.
That is a trope that I do like.
Oh yeah, they did that here. They did that on Merlin. That was cool.
Yeah. And then I'm trying to think like the really famous like well-known horror video game franchise Silent Hill. There's a few endings of Silent Hill 2, or one particular ending where that's kind of an implication for horror fans out there.
Heard of those games?
Yeah, that was all great. So glad everybody contributed to that segment except for me.
You did everything else.
That said, we're gonna do another guest heavy segment of highlight and lowlight. And we're gonna start with Frances.
All right, so my highlight is when Dean was finally sharing his emotions, because in later seasons Dean does become a personification of depression and, for not wanting to say the actual word, unaliving yourself. And for me, that's why I grabbed onto Dean so hard as my favorite character, because I also struggle with similar inner demons as he does. And so anytime that they show it on screen, it like helps validate my feelings as well as other people's feelings who are struggling with it. So I really, really like any time that they just have him being raw and vulnerable.
That's fair. I'm not sure. I think we're okay to say the actual words. Don't say them if you're not comfy saying them. But I don't think... I think that since we're off TikTok, we can say the words.
I've said way worse on this podcast.
Yeah.
True. I prefer saying unaliving. Like, to me, that's one of the millennial terms that like I'm like latching on to. I really like it.
I actually do also like it. I definitely think like dying by suicide is better than like committing, but I don't think we should be saying that anymore. But yeah unalive is kind of I really latched onto the word yeet, so I feel like I could get behind unalive.
Yeah.
I like yeet.
But in terms of like what we can and can't say, we did say fuck John Winchester 13 times in the season premiere of this season. So editing KJ counted. So
oh well, editing KJ was busy.
I mean, it's adult content, so
yeah.
We marked the episodes as explicit.
And then my low light is it should be obvious that with Neil being intimate with a zombie, that was not necessary on screen.
That was a lot. Jen, did you have a highlight and a low aim?
I did. I think my highlight was that last bit where just before Sam shoots Angela, where she says, I didn't ask to get brought back, it's still me, I'm still a person. We know this was just her girl bossing, gaslighting, manipulating, and it didn't work. But one of the things that I do love about like the tropes of like the comeback wrong thing is like sometimes it's presented as like very uncertain, like, are they themselves? Are they not themselves? Like what exactly is going on? We kind of get a flavor of that with Dean, where we're not sure if it's fully Dean, if it's not, and he's worried about it. So it didn't really pan out with Angela, but I like that they kind of hinted at it. And then Alole is, at the end, that was just like a sad time for all of us, I think. Just having an existential breakdown.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah.
It's alright. You gotta have one every now and then.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Meredith.
Highlight, I don't know, I just really enjoyed watching Angela. Like, I know that she was kind of almost one of the victims here, but like,